be talking about mapping out your retailer and broker strategy. So this is a really important topic for you in terms of mapping out a strategy for where you're going to sell your product and who are the kind of folks you need to work with. So right now we're going to bring up Bill Sipper, who's the managing partner of Cascadia Managing Brands. I'm sure he's going to be talking a little bit about what he does and who he's worked with, but he is an expert in this field, has worked with dozens of brands, large and small. So without further ado, Bill Sipper.
Thank you. I either need a stool to stand on or a lower microphone, so I'll just lower the microphone a little bit. So we're going to talk about mapping out your retailer and broker strategies. And the first thing I want to make sure everybody understands is what the role of the distributor is. So the distributor is who you sell the product to. The distributor then takes the product and delivers it to a retailer where the consumer then buys the product, hopefully. Their job is to present and sell your product to customers, retailers. Their job is to deliver your product to customers, to merchandise those products, to place and manage point of sale material, to secure multiple locations in a store. So hopefully you're on the warm shelf, you're on the cold shelf, and you have a display somewhere. And the last thing they do is they place and manage equipment like racks or refrigerators and things of that nature. There's various types of distributors and various types of distribution. And without getting very complicated, the one that most people know about is DSD, which is direct store door. A direct store door distributor would be someone like Coca-Cola, Pepsi-Cola, Dr. Pepper Snapple Group, Anheuser-Busch InBev, Miller Coors, and then you have independents like Harold Lambos and John Lenore out here, and you've got Big Geyser and Exclusive in New York City. So they're the kind of the biggest of the bunch, and also the most difficult and most costly to manage. If you were to put together a network to get into every retail account in the United States, you'd need about 455 DSD distributors throughout the country. The other types of distributors are broadliner, who traditionally sell to convenience stores. So McLean, for example, or E.B. Brown, they have an incredible portfolio of products that they sell to convenience stores, but they don't introduce new products. It's not what they're good at. There's food service distributors who make the deliveries to the cafes and to the restaurants and hotels. And again, DSD does some of this too, but that's really what the focus of a food service distributor is. Then a lot of you will get to know the next two, which is specialty food distributors and natural food distributors like UNFI, KeHE, Haddon House, distributors like that. Then there's sometimes options where you can go direct to the retailer. So you sell right to the chain's warehouse, and then it's their job to go get it to the stores. And the last is kind of a general wholesaler. It's probably the guy that brings the toilet paper and the paper tissues and all that stuff, the mainline grocery items to the supermarket chains. If anyone has any questions, please stop me and just ask. Another thing I think you need to understand, or people need to understand, is the margins and pricing that go on in the industry. So a typical DSD distributor is going to work on 30 to 33 points of gross margin. That's not markup. So it's gross margin. A typical grocery store chain is going to work on 33 to 35%. A typical produce or dairy section in a traditional grocery store is going to work on 45 to 55% margin. Natural foods distributors, 25 to 35% margin, with the exception of certain key accounts like Whole Foods, where they only work on 6 or 8% markup. So it gives you a huge advantage going into those chains. A typical C-store will work on 40 to 50% margin, and a typical drug chain will work on 45 to 50%, and a club about 11 to 13%. So in getting to these margins, obviously that means your gross profit is going to go down. It's going to change, because in order to get it to the consumer at a price that the consumer can buy it for, there's a lot of hands in the cookie jar. So your goal, in my opinion, is a target of 45% margin. You won't get there in the beginning, but as long as you know through efficiency and through buying patterns that you can increase if you can decrease your cost of goods, which is very common, then you're okay as long as you can get to that number and you have enough capital to let you work during the period of time in which you're building to 45% margin. Yes?
Is there an opportunity for new companies to start low and raise their price, or is that just not possible? You always have to start at the high and try to come down.
The question was, is there an opportunity for companies to start low and go high? Is that the question?
Go higher.
Go higher.
Yeah, I think if you taught a Harvard MBA class on this, somebody would say yes. But in the real world, the answer is probably no. It's much easier to be too high and bring your price down. I use Suja as a great example. They started at $8.99, $9.99, and they found that they're getting a great piece of business, but they want the next level of business at $4.99, $5.99. So they've created products that are at that retail price because their cost efficiencies have gotten so much better. So no, I don't think you can start low and go high. I do think you can start high and go low.
Is your gross profit target, that 45%, is that after you've taken out your discounts? Is that according to GAAP and you've got a net sales, or is that gross sales?
No, that's gross.
That's gross sales?
That's gross. That should be the target.
Can I ask you to explain that natural foods distributor portion again, the dual structure, the 25 to 35 and 6 to 8? I missed it.
That's okay. So for the most part, they're going to charge a typical natural food store. If you go to a Mother's or Lassen's around here, they're going to charge them or work on margin of 25 to 35%. But when they deal with accounts like Sprouts or they deal with accounts like Whole Foods, they have a negotiated price. And in order to get their national contract, the distributor has to compromise on their margins. But because they're bringing so many things to the store, maybe 5 times a week, they can afford to work on 6 to 8% margin. And that gives Whole Foods a competitive advantage. A lot of supermarket chains have the same relationship with wholesale distributors like Super Value. But for this little segment, we're really talking about the bigger chains.
So that top tier, 25 to 35, is that for a ma and pa
Yes.
natural foods store?
If you're building a plan, okay, I would put 25 to 35% margin as what's going to be realistic, okay? In terms of the markup from the distributor to the retailer. However, there are going to be situations where that number is different, and it could be as low as 6 to 8. But I think for the most part, 80% of the customers your distributor will charge them 25 to 35% margin. Yes.
And should we be using 40% for the retail store, like when we're counting backwards?
Well, these are the margins for the stores. So
I thought this was the margin for the distributors.
no, the DSD distributor is going to work on 30 to 33%. A grocery chain is going to work on 33 to 35%. Grocery chain, but in the produce or the deli section, is going to work on 45 to 55.
I'm confused still. So let's pretend.
I'm really good at confusing people.
No, but let's pretend that the product's $1. Say you want the public to buy it for $1.
Okay?
The retail store, I'm told, needs to make 40%, right? So
It depends what channel.
Okay.
So every channel has a different number. So in a deli in New York City, they double the price. So you're looking at 100% margin. If you are talking about a drugstore chain like CVS or Walgreens, they're going to work on 40 to 45% margin. 45 to 50% margin. If you're talking about a typical convenience store like Arco AM/PM, they're going to work on 40 to 50% margin.
So where's the distributor's markup? If I'm selling it to a distributor, they're going to take their cut, but then the retailer needs to take their cut.
That's
so
correct.
I only see one set of cuts here.
Well, I didn't put both in, but now that you ask. No, the distributor will make, it depends on the distributor, obviously, and a lot is negotiable. But if you go to a DSD distributor, they're usually not going to work less than 30% margin. UNFI typically will work on 28 to 33% margin. Haddon House, 30 to 35% margin. So every distributor is a little bit different. And part of it's what you can negotiate and how good your price point is. So if you have a great product and the new distributor, like a Haddon House, really believes that this is the next item, they may work on 30 to 33% instead of working on 35% if you're going to hit a certain price point. Does that answer your question?
No, but
All right, I was going to say I'm around, so
Yeah, please
don't
note-
worry. I'm
please note
really
that-
good at confusing people, so.
No, this is an interesting subject. It's, it gets a little technical in some cases, but
And I really don't want to explain to you how bad my math skills are. I wish my partners were here right now.
yes. But Bill is going to be at the roundtable session, so if you have very specific questions for him, please ask him then. We got one more question, then we probably need to move on at that
Yeah,
point.
just quickly, I don't see Target or Walmart on here. Can you talk a little bit about their margins?
What do you guys find everything I don't put in here? I think Target and Walmart are pretty close to your traditional grocery, 33 to 35%, depending. Walmart will work on less on really big items like, pet food or like a name brand pet food or Gatorade or Dasani or something like that. But for the most part, they're going to make their 35% margin. There was one more question.
Yeah.
Just to make sure I understand that, so this is not a pick one scenario necessarily.
No,
This
it's,
is a cumulative. If you have a DSD, you got to build in their margin.
that's correct.
If you have a grocery store, you got to build in their margin too.
That's correct.
I think that's what was being asked earlier.
Right, that's what I was trying to figure out.
Yeah.
Okay, yes.
You may have to pick two,
You have to,
or maybe in some
or,
cases three.
or you go direct to Walmart's distribution facilities, which is probably a failure, to be honest, for a new beverage.
Can I ask a question another way? So if I'm selling a single bottle of juice and it's retail on the shelf at the grocery store for $3, who else is getting some of the $3 and how much?
The how much, I can't do reverse math in my head. Trust me, you don't want to go there. But I will say that the retailer, if it's a grocery store, it's going to make 30 to 35% margin. So you got to build 60 to 65% in there to get to the suggested retail price. Ballpark.
All really, really good questions.
You wanna go on?
Yeah, let's move on now.
Okay. Thank God. I can't tell you how much I'm sweating up here. I've never had a crowd like this. So let me ask you a question by show of hands. How many people have bought a new beverage item for the first time at Costco? You did. You did. Okay. All right. How many of you have purchased a new non-alcoholic beverage for the very first time at a drugstore? Okay. And how many of you purchased a new non-alcoholic beverage for the very first time at a deli? So the majority is the deli. Don't try and fit a round peg into a square hole. So yes, Costco is getting much more innovative than they used to. Target is getting much more innovative. Walmart is getting much more innovative. But you have to ask yourself, is it right for me? And what does that do to the rest of my distribution system if I begin my business at Costco? And as we said, Costco works on 11 to 13% margin. If you sell them direct, you get a great retail price, but now you have no margin for the distributor, and worse than that, the distributor says, hey, I'm not distributing the product. People can buy it cheaper at Costco. So you really have to think about the channels that you're going to go into before you make that move. So decide which channels and the timing of the channels, because you really, you've got to be focused. You cannot do everything, okay? I'd rather see everybody be the master of one domain than try and be all things to all people and not do it nearly as well. There are definite ramifications for decisions you make, like selling Costco direct or selling to Walmart's distribution center, or even selling a UNFI or KeHE, because other distributors that you want to get to other types of accounts may not buy your product because of that. So some of the channels that we've been talking about are independent delis, food service, convenience stores, conventional grocery, drug and mass merchandisers, club stores, vending, military, and natural specialty. If you add up what we know to be the entire universe, including restaurants and food service, there's about 2.2 million locations in the United States. I think natural food, it was about, was it 30,000? No. I don't remember the number, but I'll get it later. I think it's either 10 or 30,000. I can't remember which one it is, but it's a very small number. Everyone talks about the importance of getting Whole Foods. Whole Foods has about 400 stores. It's a very small percentage of 2.2 million. So if you don't get Whole Foods the one time they review the product segment per year, don't worry about it. Move on and wait till the next year in that particular area. What you need to know about distributors. The distributors have a lot of brands. A DSD distributor could have 1,000 SKUs. a United Natural Foods, maybe 100,000 SKUs. You are just a small part until you can prove that your product is worthy of their time. I know it sounds arrogant, and I don't mean it to be, but you have to prove to them that the product is going to sell before they're going to get behind your product. Running a distribution company is incredibly expensive. When we ran Naked Juice, we were averaging $10,000 a month in parking tickets alone in New York City. So it's a very expensive proposition. They bring products from the warehouse to the account. And what I mean by that is don't expect them to go to the chain and make the headquarter call. And don't expect them to go to the bagel shop and make the call because they're too busy taking their Snapple order, their Budweiser order, their Coca-Cola order, whatever they're doing, and you're just a little item for them. So you need feet in the street, whether it's yourselves or you hire people or you have brokers or something like that, to prove to the distributor that it's worth them putting their time and money into your product. Again, until you have proven some sort of performance metric is successful in their market, they won't get behind it. A couple of other things. Most distributors are not going to co-op the cost of promotions and incentives until you've proven that concept. They can be incredibly powerful once you get them started, and nothing beats the strength of a DSD system. But it's not so easy to get into it, and it's not so easy to hit the entire country with a DSD system. You need price and promotional incentives for the distributor, which is going to take away some more margin from you. Need to actively manage them on a monthly basis, set objectives, review objectives with them. Most people will put a product into a distributor and think that's success. Well, success is really when the consumer pulls it off the shelf. So there's a whole lot more work that needs to be done. And a distributor needs to be held accountable in a very respectful and professional manner. And more than anything else, focus is critical. When I was at Nantucket Nectars, we only introduced 3 new markets a year. And it was because of our CEO and our VP of sales. Their attitude was, we're going to get into a market, we're going to own the market, and then we're going to move on. We're big believers in focus. What are distributors looking for? Well, they're looking at your ingredients. I can't tell you how quickly people bear down on the ingredients now. They're looking at calories and fat. They're looking at consumer and retailer demand, which is often hard to prove when you have a new cutting-edge product. They're looking at your promotional strategy, your pricing. Are you it's funny because earlier this morning you said uniqueness is not, an investor's not so interested in uniqueness, which is right. At the same time, the retailer is very interested in uniqueness because all he cares about is how much money does he put in his pocket and what's going to drive incremental sales for his store. They're looking for margin. They're looking for sales support, like salespeople in the market or a broker or a merchandiser. They're looking for exclusivity, which that will get to the next slide. A lot of fun. And they're looking for a buyout clause. And we'll talk about that here. So a DSD distributor wants an exclusive contract. That basically says that they can sell your product without hitting very many minimums for as long as they want, and you can't do very much about it. When you are small and you have no ability to negotiate and you have no leverage, you get stuck in these agreements. When you get larger, the table really turns and your strength for negotiating is incredibly powerful. But the first thing that they're going to ask for is perpetuity, which means that it's a contract that just continues on and on and on. Believe it or not, the Coca-Cola and Pepsi-Cola systems are set up with contracts in perpetuity. So unless a distributor doesn't pay his bills to Coke or Pepsi, and his volume declines more than X% compared to the counties around him, there's nothing that Coca-Cola or Pepsi-Cola can do to get them out of that contract. And the other is term. Term is like a 5-year term, 10-year term. But you're giving away 5 or 10 years to a customer or to a distributor, and you really don't know what their performance is going to be. Even if you set minimum goals in the contract, how do you know what they're going to be if you've never sold the product before? They're going to look for a buyout in the contract. And this is actually favorable to you, believe it or not, because you want the ability to get out of that contract if the Coca-Cola distributor in the market wants to distribute you and you're with a little small distributor who's got 500 accounts. But they're going to look at 2 to 4 times gross profit for every case they've sold over the last 52 weeks. On the East Coast, it's really about 1 to 2 times. On the West Coast, it's crazy. It's closer to 4. So and it varies by market to market. They're going to want an invasion fee. You have a question?
Yeah, so we're caught in a kind of a catch-22 situation.
Welcome to my world.
I know, right?
Yeah.
So our distributors want chain authorization, but our retailers want distributors, and we keep going round and round in this cycle. So how do we get out of that? Both of them have tentatively or verbally said yes, but neither one will budge without the other.
So I think it's about negotiating harder, because I think what we tell people, and we do ourselves with our sales folks, go get the chain. Get him to say yes. Then go back to the distributor and say, if you come on board, they have agreed to come on board. Okay, so I would start at the chain level first and work my way backwards. Good enough? They're going to want an invasion fee in the contract, which basically says if you pick up a national account like Starbucks and Starbucks doesn't buy from the distributor that you're currently selling, that they want $1 a case or $1.50 a case for every case you sell into every Starbucks in their territory. They're going to want manpower and marketing commitments. They're going to, and the last piece is, there are people, there are attorneys that specialize in distribution contracts. Please, it's like $1,000 more than going to a friend or family. And it's just, and some people are in the room. No, but seriously, it really makes a lot of sense to talk to lawyers that have done this before. I was once negotiating a contract with the Honickman Group only 5 or 6 years ago. Honickman Group is the largest independent Pepsi-Cola distributor, Canada Dry distributor. They own the quadrant from Richmond, Virginia, north through New York, New Jersey. And I had said to the lawyer, don't worry about that because I've dealt with them for so many years. I know we're not going to change that. And he said, want to bet? He said, I just got a concession like 5 months ago. Sent the contract back, and he got the concession. So I wouldn't have even asked for it because I'm just so used to working with them under their rules, because normally we're working with brands that don't have a lot of leverage. Recommending new recommendations for your presentation of a new item to a distributor. The most important thing to the distributor is what is in it for them. How much money is the distributor going to make from your product? And it's not just the margin, it's the dollar value that they're going to put in the bank every month. If they sell 100 cases, if they sell 1,000 cases, if they sell 10,000 cases. Everyone needs to have an elevator speech. I can't tell you how many times people go into distributor calls and they think they're going to make a 20-minute presentation in PowerPoint. It's not going to happen. Okay, you've got 5 minutes to really gain their attention. If you got their attention and they're interested, you may have another 5 to 10 minutes. So your elevator speech is critical to get them interested. Monthly recommended promotional and incentive calendars by channel. You're going to want to develop a calendar and say, this is what we want to do in each of these months. For UNFI, for example, which is the natural food distributor, it's usually 15% off invoice one time per quarter for 30 days. On an intro for a DSD beverage, it could be as crazy as buy one, get one free for the first 90 days in order to get on the shelf. How are you going to get the word out about your product? Is it going to be social media and digital? Is it going to be demos? Is it going to be sweepstakes? All these things are important to the distributor. There are different types of promotions. We're going to go through this quickly. There's off-invoice allowances. There's billbacks, which is the best. Billbacks and scan downs are the best for the manufacturer. There's hip pocket deals, and every time you see a display in those aisles, someone paid for that or gave a promotional fund for that. Scan down, so it scans at the computer and 50 cents, for example, comes off. Coupons, and again, incentive programs. Be prepared to answer questions. They're going to want to know if you've done any consumer research or testing. I can't tell you the last time we've done a lot of consumer research or testing, and we've had some really good brands, including Zico and Hint. So don't take that as a hurdle, but understand it's going to come up and figure out how you're going to handle that answer. What's your shelf life and spoils policy? What are your payment terms? What are your order lead times and minimums? Are your prices delivered or are they pickup price? And are you going to give me sales support? And again, exclusivity. So there's this concept of natural specialty and DSDs creating a hybrid system, and that's really been the goal for most people for the last 20 years. It's a very difficult call which way you go. DSD is a long road and very expensive. Natural and specialty is a little faster, but doesn't hit as many points of distribution. You can't service the entire country with a DSD system or a specialty distributor system or a natural food system. So it's a real trade-off that you have to think about. DSD understandably wants that exclusivity and they want protection. They don't want to build a brand from nothing and then lose it when they get to 100,000 cases a month because there's a better distributor in the market that all of a sudden is interested in that product. Yes?
DSD doesn't go to natural markets.
Yes, they do.
They do.
Sure they do.
They'll go to Sprouts.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, many do. Now, can you get the whole Sprouts stores, covered by a DSD system? That I don't know. That's a harder one.
If they didn't service someone, wouldn't it be easy, not easy, but wouldn't it be possible to say, hey, you don't hit Whole Foods, so how about we agree to everything except Whole Foods so that I can do you under 5 Whole Foods?
Yeah, that's like Greek language in this DSD world. Like they're so used to being exclusive on products that it just doesn't make sense to them. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, and there are times when we get frustrated because we already have a Whole Foods in place, and now all of a sudden the big DSD distributor wants to come on board and he goes, I'm not doing it if I can't sell DSD. I'm like, there's 12 stores. You service 18,000 stores. What's the big deal? So, it's a definite problem. I'm going to make this really quick, 2 minutes. So brokers. They can be very helpful in some situations like grocery, mass, and drug channel. They may interfere with DSD distributors, but brokers in general are going to want 3 to 5% commission, and some are going to require minimum monthly retainers. This is the most important one out of the brokers. In the natural food industry, a broker is almost mandatory. You cannot do a large amount of business without a good natural food broker in the natural food channel. You won't get the buyer meetings with Whole Foods. You won't get the buyer meetings with Sprouts. You won't get the constant sales frequency calls that they make on accounts. So their job is to make the call on the distributor, make the call at the key account for the chains, make in-store calls and make sure your product is on the shelf, build displays, and book promotions. That's what a broker really does. They're going to want either retainer or commission, whichever is greater. So it's usually about $1,000 to $1,500 a month per territory, or 5% commission, whichever is greater. Most brands wind up paying the minimum retainer for at least 2 years before they get to that point where the sales is higher than the retainer. Real quick, this is the last slide. This is not a difficult business, so contrary to what everybody is telling you in the last couple of hours, and we'll tell you the rest of the day, don't make it more complicated than it needs to be. You've got a product, it's a good product, you want to sell it to the consumer, figure out everything in the middle. It's really not that hard. If you don't know something, ask for help. So we don't charge people for advice. If you call up and say, hey, I've got this dilemma, great, give us a call. We're not looking to charge you. And I think a lot of the people in the room that are speaking have the same philosophy. So ask for help. Focus like a laser beam. Do one thing and do it well, and then move on to the next. Don't try and be everything to all people, because it will, most of the time it will fail. And don't give up. The brands that have succeeded the most, the Snapples, the Nantucket Nectars, the Fresh Samantha Odwalla, Naked Juice, Hint, they were Zico. When we first started selling Zico, people would say, Mark would say, the owner, don't let people sample it. Like, what do you mean? He'd say, 50% of the people love the taste of coconut water and 50% hate it. But he was dogmatically persistent about the fact that coconut water was going to be the next craze. And obviously, he was right. Thank you.